Last week, middle of the week sometime, I tweeted this: a fellow-born Canadian making us proud, and then the link to a little video clip. The fellow-born Canadian was U.S. Republican Senator Ted Cruz, who was born in Calgary. And he's at the center, or one of the people at the center, of the Obamacare battle that has shut down the United States government this past week. And for weeks, his pride and arrogance and politics have been pushing my buttons. And so finally, I had to tweet this NBC News mashup video of this big speech that he made.
Do you like green eggs and ham? I do not like them, Sam I am. I do not like green eggs and ham. Most Americans could not give a flying flip about a bunch of politicians in Washington. Who cares? You know, almost all of us are in cheap suits with bad haircuts. Who cares? Could you, would you, with a goat? I'm a big fan of eating White Castle burgers. I am not in my argument boots, and I'll confess, I really do feel embarrassed by that. Mike Lee, I am your father. The Empire will strike back.
So I laughed, made sure everybody who claims to follow me on Twitter laughed too at this man. So last Sunday, I'm watching Meet the Press. Yes, I am a bit of a U.S. political junkie. I don't know why. And he was being interviewed, and he still irked me. But for the first time, I saw more of who he was, and begrudgingly had to admit, this guy is actually very, very sharp and a great debater, quite brilliant. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus spoke very unsettling words about judging. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own? How can you say to your brother, let me take that speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First, take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Frederick Dale Brunner, a theologian, wrote in commentary on this Bible passage, "It is a law that we consistently undervalue the size of our own faults and overvalue the size of others' faults. Every little speck, every fault, every wrong way of thinking, every shortfall, every flaw, I see them perfectly in other people all the time, even as we are ignorant of a lot of those very same, sometimes, flaws in us." And Jesus teaches, don't judge that way. Don't be so quick or so harsh or so sure of yourself, because in the same way that you judge others, you're going to be judged. You're the one who is setting the terms for how you're going to be judged. All week long, this question has been haunting me. Do you want to be judged the way you judge? So then we're never supposed to judge anything, right? And everyone can just be who they are completely, and for good or bad, and it's kind of the mantra of our culture now. You know, you can't judge. Don't judge. But that's not right either, because you got to choose the right babysitter when you have somebody come over. You got to judge. You want to choose the right person to date, or the right career to follow, or what to say. Anytime you say something or do something or act or don't, you're making a kind of judgment. I mean, of course we're called to judge. All the time we judge. The Bible, throughout the Bible, calls us to be wise and discerning and thoughtful, to make good choices, to weigh and to assess and to conclude and then act. That's judging. It's good to judge. And Jesus himself, in that one chapter that I read from, calls us to be judges and discern all the time. Well, twice in that chapter. In the next verse he says, "Don't give to dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs," which is kind of harsh. But it's, judge. And then a little bit before the judging words that he spoke, he said, "Watch out for false prophets." Well, how else are you going to know who's false and who's not apart from judging? So judge, and judge wisely, but don't judge, is what he's teaching. Judge well, but don't be judgmental, no matter how that other nurse is acting, or that patient, or that customer, or that family member. So, what's the difference? At this point in writing my message, I hovered over the word judgmental and looked for synonyms, and these popped up. Critical, hypercritical, condemnatory, negative, disapproving, disparaging, pejorative. That's me. They put my picture beside pejorative because that's my primary way of judging others. Don't judge that way because God doesn't judge that way. Jesus said, "Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice." You should pray like this, he said, "Forgive us our sins just as we have forgiven those who've sinned against us." God always judges out of perfection and holiness and love. And his love, and he is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in love. God is the only perfect judge, and you and I are not. You can never make the ultimate or final call on someone because you're not omniscient. You can never see clearly to see what the issue is in that other person or situation because you've got this plank that's coming out of your eyes. We ought never to stereotype or limit another human being made in the image of God because we can't see all that God sees and all that God has for them and the future that he has for them. How can you ever see that when you make your judgment, O judge of all things? We don't know how God feels about that person, that politician, that person who drives you nuts. And if you think you can see, and I believe that sometimes we can see, I feel like Tevier, on one hand, but on the other hand, but sometimes we can see. And I believe sometimes we are to say, we're called to speak God's truth into a situation. So even if you think you can see, do it with this kind of reticence and timing. And shut up more than speak up. And listen more than say. And know that all of your judging is sub-judging. It's subservient to the judging heart, the perfectly judging heart of God. It's secondary. Don't ever judge presuming you're God and that your take is infallible. Because then you make your judgment an idol. Don't judge in ways that undermine the jurisdiction of the ultimate judge. And if you do, we all do, right? All the time. And if you do it at your own peril. Because if you're going to start making all the calls about what's real and true and what reality is, then you are calling God's judgment into judgment.